Peace, family. It's your brother, Marc Lamont Hill. Welcome to the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel. We are here for night school every night here on the Marc Lamont Hill official channel. We hold night school where I break down the most controversial topics, the most compelling debates, the most long-standing and enduring conversations that are going on in the world today. And we don't do it like anybody else does it. We don't have superficial talking points. We don't have drive-by analysis. Now we break it down in depth, intellectual deep dives. It's not a cable news show, not a podcast even. This is a global classroom, and tonight is no exception. We got a lot of ground to cover. We got a lot of stuff we want to get going on. And I want to start by shouting out all of you who are members of the channel. We haven't done that in a while, and we need to sometimes. Sometimes I got to remind the people how important they are to me, because I never forget, So shout out to Hasna, who is here. Shout out to Kime Aboyade Acosta. Shout out to Roseability. Shout out to Dallas's finest here, Jazz LP. So good to see all of y'all in the building. Shout out to Sahora. Shout out to Karen D. Shout out to who else is in this room that some of the regulars. Again, I'm talking Roland DD's in the building almost every single night. Appreciate you. Nicole Davis, shout out to you. Coyote Hole, shout out to you. So many of y'all here. I can't shout out everybody, but I just want to give a few people some love here who I see all the time. People like James Harvey and AK. I appreciate you. I appreciate that Joe Clark profile photo there too. That's fly. I don't agree with Joe Clark's style. We can talk about that during the Q&A tonight if we do it. My sister Ebony, good to see you. Good to see you the other night too. Assalamu alaikum. Marina Frazier, shout out. Upright Consultant, shout out to you. All right, family, we're going to get started. But again, so much going on in the world today. I want to make sure that we cover all of it. I'm having a little bit of a lighting issue. I don't know what's going on today. A little bit of a tech issue. We'll work it out. We'll work it out right now. Let me see if I can turn the light on something, man. We rocking and rolling at 100% tonight. I could turn this on. This helps a little bit. This isn't the problem, but this may fix the problem. What's going on in this place? I don't know what's going on. Now the light looks crazy. Let me see. We'll work it out, y'all. Anyway, welcome to night school, y'all. I got a bunch of stuff I want to talk to you about. Up first, let's talk about New York University. NYU has gone nuts. For the last year, we have seen campus protests. Since October 7th, universities and colleges all around the country have been sites of protests, radical resistance. We've seen encampments. We've seen protests. We've seen uprisings. We've seen walkouts. And it's been an attempt to hold the United States accountable and the U.S. university system accountable for its role, its complicity in the genocide that's taking place in Gaza right now, and that has been ongoing. One of the things we saw in the aftermath of the spring protests, and there were so many of them, was the implementation of policies over the summer that would kind of sneak up on you, right? Like the kids go home for the summer is the idea, and they don't know what's going on because they're home. This is the idea. I'm not saying it's true, but this is how they think. The university thinks, right? That the kids will go home and they'll come back and all those protest areas will be gone. All those encampments will be criminalized. All the resistance will be dismissed. Even the faculty who support and maybe even enable some of this stuff, they'll also be knocked out the box. That's the theory. Well, that's exactly what NYU is banking on, because they shared their new code of conduct last week, right as the students, I shouldn't call them kids, right as the students are coming back to campus. Now, the logic of the policy is that the policy will curtail bigotry. We are going to have an unequivocal campus code of conduct that will prevent students from being mistreated, that will prevent faculty from being mistreated, that will create safety on the campus. Sounds good. Sounds good. But as always, the devil is in the details. As always, the devil is in the details. So when you actually look at them details, when you actually go to New York University's code of conduct, which I did, because night school, we do our homework. Let's take a gander, shall we? NYU's guidance and expectations on student conduct. They have the whole bit about, our academic mission. We want to pursue our scholarly our academic aims. We want to make this a place of teaching, learning, and scholarship. We want to do all the things that, again, make sense, right? They all make sense. We want a great campus climate. We want a great campus environment. Who doesn't, right? That's the point, right? But let's skip to the chase. Let's skip to the chase on the NDAH policy, right? The non-discrimination and anti-harassment policy. Again, a university should have a non-discrimination and anti-harassment policy, or an NDAH. Nobody disagrees with that. Let's be very clear, because later on, I don't want y'all coming up in here saying Mark disagrees with an anti-discrimination policy, because he don't. He don't. However, let's keep going. Sorry, this is not the most user-friendly website, which, again, not a coincidence. They don't want it to be user-friendly. It's part of the hustle, y'all. So they said some examples of activities that will violate the NDAH policy, which is intended to curtail what? Racism, colorism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, xenophobia, sexism, transphobia, ableism, and other forms of bigotry involving protected characteristics covered by the policy. Let's be clear. Racism, colorism, anti-Semitism, Islam, so things that are related to one's identity, ethnicity, religion, race, gender identity, sexual identity, ability status. These are things that are very clearly protected, and things that you can be in violation of the university policy if you discriminate based on these things. In other words, I can say, I don't want you in my class because you've been a disruption. I can say, I don't want you to join this club because you have a low GPA. I cannot say, I don't want you in my class because you are from Pakistan. I can't say, I don't want you to join this club because you are transgender, etc., etc., etc. So these are the examples they give you: refusing to work with each other, targeting someone for harassment or intimidation, ostracism based on identity, use of dissemination of tropes about protected groups, cause for genocide of an entire people or group. Very interesting example. That call for genocide thing is purely an anti-Palestinian thing. And again, I'm not saying Palestinians are calling for genocide. I'm saying that Palestinian language of resistance has often been smeared and misrepresented as a call for genocide. So they put that in there so that when you say free Palestine from the river to the sea, they can now pretend that you're calling for genocide. It was the substance of those congressional hearings last year. But I'll keep going because that's not the point today. You see all this stuff, and then they say this. This is the heart of the matter. Using code words like Zionist does not eliminate the possibility that your speech violates the NDAH policy. For many Jewish people, Zionism is a part of their Jewish identity. Speech and conduct that would violate the NDAH if targeting Jewish or Israeli people can also violate the NDAH if directed towards Zionists. Wow. For example, excluding Zionists from an open event, calling for the death of Zionists, applying as no Zionist litmus test for participation in any NYU activity, using or disseminating tropes, stereotypes, and conspiracies about Zionists, e.g. Zionists control the media, demanding a person who is perceived to be Jewish or Israeli to state a position on Israel or Zionism, minimizing or denying the Holocaust, or invoking Holocaust imagery or symbols to harass or discriminate. Something fascinating has just happened here. And I want y'all to really pay careful attention to what just happened here. The NYU language has been carefully crafted it's been crafted in a way that conflates Zionism and anti-Semitism at the same time as saying they're different and both problematic as a site of discrimination. So let me back up and make it plain for you. Let me make it plain for you. What they're saying, what they're doing is they're saying, look, obviously you can't be discriminatory toward Jews. Obviously you can't harass Jews or Muslims or white people or black people or women or trans folk or cis folk, or right? That's the obvious part. That's what they're saying, right? And I agree, it's obvious. You shouldn't harass or discriminate against anybody. But then they're saying, well, Zionism sometimes is just a code for Jew. And this is something that many Zionists argue, and that many liberal Zionists have argued, and people like Richie Torres, right? And what they're basically saying is, for a lot of Jews, in fact, they literally say for some Jews, Zionism is part of their Judaism. Well, that might be true, but that doesn't make it okay. That would be like me saying that for some Christians, colonizing or conquest was part of their faith system. They believed that Jesus or God wanted them to go around the world conquering Muslims and converting Jews and slaying atheists, or whatever the thing you might want to say. All those things are not good things. But if I say that something is central to my faith or my identity, right? Somebody might say, as a white person, I believe manifest destiny is part of my identity as a white person or as a European. I believe that this is my work. This is my call. Does that mean then that if I reject that from you, I'm rejecting your whiteness because you're attaching your whiteness or your maleness or your straightness or your Muslimness or your Christianness or your Jewishness or your whateverness to something that's problematic? No, we have a right to critique that. And it's not Zionism as such. Zionism has become the shorthand for a bigger conversation, which is not about Zionism in an abstract ideal. It's about political Zionism. It's about the belief that Israel has a right to function as a ethno-state that gives superior rights, privileges, freedoms, access, etc., to Jews over non-Jews. It's about saying it's about normalizing apartheid and settler colonialism. That's what political Zionism is. We're not talking about cultural Zionism. We're not talking about spiritual Zionism. We're not talking about religious Zionism. Those things might be central to your Jewishness. And for some people, they tie their Jewish identity to political Zionism. That might be every religion, every faith, every ethnicity has those dynamics. Jews should not be singled out for this. They should not be isolated for this. They should not be criticized for this at the expense of everybody else. No, anybody who's engaged in a political act or a social act that is harmful to other people should be criticized. I have no issue with Jewish people. None of us should have an issue with Jewish people. What we have an issue with is the state of Israel's actions as a nation state. And as a nation state, Israel is functioning in a way that actually doesn't represent the beauty and the justice focus and the dignity and the extraordinariness of Judaism. Israel's not about that. We're talking about the nation state. And so what the NYU statement is doing is conflating those two things quite intentionally by trying to make me believe that because some people attach Zionism to their Jewish identity, that all of a sudden makes it untouchable, right? Now, some of these things on the list should be on the list. Let me be clear about that. Calling for the death of Zionists, yeah, I get why on campus somebody identifies as a Zionist, you can't call for their death. You shouldn't be calling for their death at all. Applying a no Zionist litmus test for participation in any NYU activity, I disagree with that. Here's why. If someone were to say that they believe that women are not qualified to do math or to do science, technology, to do STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, math, whatever, right? If someone were to say that, I don't believe that women are as smart as men and cannot do this stuff. It would be not unreasonable to say that the person who believes that shouldn't join the Young Feminist Club. Or they shouldn't be allowed to, they should be able to go to an activity for feminists. They shouldn't be locked out of the room. They pay the tuition. but maybe you shouldn't be on the panel, right? Like maybe that's okay to say you should be on the panel, right? There are boundaries for what should and should not be permissible. Now, again, if you're part of the campus community, you should be allowed to be part of a democratic process, even if I disagree with you 1,000%. But saying that no, but that Zionists can never be a litmus test for anything. If I were Muslim and I were an undergrad and I wanted to run for president of the Young Christian Organization or the young or the Young Jewish Organization, maybe it'd be reasonable to say, hey, you can't run for our office here unless you're of the same religion. Using or disseminating tropes. This is an interesting one. Using or disseminating tropes. Again, this is where they're conflating Judaism and Zionism. The tropes that get disseminated aren't about Zionists, they're about Jews. And they're anti-Semitic and should be rejected. Anti-Semitic tropes should always be rejected. And anyone who is caught trafficking in them, whether you made them, whether you shared them, whether you, whatever, you should be held accountable. Stereotypes and conspiracies about Zionists, e.g., Zionists control the media. You know, again, typically the conspiracy theory, the cabal narrative, the controlling images narrative, you know, where you say the Jews are control the media, that they're conspiratorial, that they work behind the scenes. All these things are about Jewish people, and again, they are anti-Semitic tropes. They are deeply dangerous, deeply harmful, deeply problematic, and should be completely rejected. And anyone who traffics in them should be held accountable. Again, I agree. Minimizing or denying the Holocaust. Holocaust denial, Holocaust minimalization, all of that stuff is awful and deeply anti-Semitic. But no one is doing that to Zionists. They're doing that to Jews writ large. That's not a Zionist issue. But by mixing those two things together, it makes people think that somehow when you say Zionist, you really just mean Jew. And are there people in the world who may conflate those two things on purpose so that they can be anti-Semitic and polite company? I'm sure there's somebody in the world who does that. But that is not mainstream action. That is not mainstream thought. That is not even a reasonable minority of the people. In other words, when people are out in these streets critiquing Zionism, challenging Zionism, rejecting Zionism, they're doing so because Zionism as a political project has led to the dislocation, the dispossession, the cleansing, the destruction, the removal, the erasure of Palestinian people for over 100 years. And that's what people are worried about. That's what people are talking about. We got to be honest about that. So NYU, Zionists should not be a protected class. Jews should be a protected class. Muslims should be a protected class. Women should be a protected class. There are lots of things that should be protected classes. But Zionism? No. I'm gonna say no to that. Another story that we need to cover, a big story today. New images published in the New Yorker show the brutal reality of one of the most horrific incidents of the Iraq War, the Haditha Massacre. Now, the Haditha Massacre involves U.S. Marines and 24 innocent Iraqi civilians, including women and children as young as 3 years old. Now, the images that they posted are quite disturbing. I'm going to share some of them with you because I think it's important that they be seen. But they are ugly. They are tough to look at. But I want to show you some of them directly from the New Yorker because I want to make sure that my colleagues at the New Yorker get the credit they deserve for the fine work that they did. And that, again, you also see their warning, which is, again, the photos are graphic. They show men and women and young children in defenseless positions, many of them shot in the head at relatively close range. This is quite disturbing. A 5-year-old girl, Zainab Yunus Salim, was shot in the head by a U.S. Marine. Zainab died in a bed next to her mother, sisters, and brother. A Marine scrawled the number 11 on her back with a red Sharpie marker after the killings to differentiate the dead in the photos. I'll show you some more, but understand this happened in the town of Haditha, Iraq, a place where families lived far from the front lines of battle. And then on November 19th, 2005, after a bomb exploded near their convoy in Iraq, U.S. Marines killed these civilians. Now, allegedly, these U.S. soldiers killed these people, believing that they were insurgents. This was the argument, right? That these people were insurgents. But everybody they killed was actually innocent. And despite the seriousness of this, we didn't really get the proper treatment given to it in the media. I'm going to show you just a few more of these. And again, you can all take a 5-minute break and walk away if this is too hard for you to look at. Look at this photo. A mother, Aida Yassin Ahmed, who was 40 years old, surrounded by her dead children in the family's bedroom. Everyone on the bed was shot and killed by the U.S. Marines. On the left is Sabah, 10 years old, Aisha, 3, Zainab in the foreground, 5, Muhammad, 8, and Aida. The sole survivor was an 11-year-old girl, Safa, who hid in a corner next to the bed during the shooting. 3-year-old Aisha Yunus Salim was shot to death. A Marine wrote the number 12 on her cheek after she was killed. To her left is Sabah, who was 10, and Muhammad, again, who was 8. When you look at these images, look at this 15-year-old Noor Yunus Salim next to the bed where her mother and 4 of her siblings were killed. Noor, the surviving sister, told the New Yorker that she and Noor had hidden behind the bed, but that a Marine had aimed his rifle under the bed and fired at them. The Marine missed Safa, but Noor was killed. The bedroom where Aida, her sister, and 5 of her children were killed, you can see it. Look at the blood splatters. The photo was taken after the bodies and mattresses had been removed. Look how much blood was still left in the room. Look at what's on the floor. This is gruesome. Look at this. A mother, Esma Salman Rasif, 32, and her 4-year-old son, Abdullah, lie dead in the corner of their living room. Esma's arm is around her son, perhaps in a final attempt to protect him. Esma appears to be injured in the upper back. Abdullah was determined by military investigators to have a bullet wound in his head. NCIS investigators concluded that the Marine who shot Abdullah was standing less than 6 feet away. Can you imagine shooting a 4-year-old 6 feet away? These people are cowards. The arm of Khumaisa Tumaali, 66 years old, who was killed in the hallway of the first house the Marines entered. These people are cowards. Look at this death scene. Look at this death sequence. It's shameful. It's inexcusable. It's indefensible. And despite all of this nastiness, we know very little about it. And the reason we know very little about it is because the Marines covered it all up. They kept it secret until now. Although charges were initially brought against the Marines who were involved, this is tough. The charges all got dropped. But now when you look at these new images from the New Yorker, you see these weren't mistakes. No one thought a 3-year-old was an insurgent. And you can't say, well, this was just this was collateral damage that was inevitable and unavoidable. You can't say that when you're shooting 3 and 4-year-olds at 6 feet. That means you know exactly who you're shooting and you know exactly why you're shooting. And that's a problem. Now, this story is important for lots of reasons, not the least of which is it exposes the harsh realities and grave injustices of war, especially when it's being committed by people who pretend and who purport to be upholding moral and ethical standards, not just for themselves, but for the world. The U.S. and Israel are 2 countries the most that brag about how moral and upright their armies are, their militaries are. When you see these stories, you realize how disgusting they are, how far they are from moral leaders. Anyway, much gratitude to the New Yorker for exposing this. And we hope that there will be greater accountability and global outrage at what happened here with 24 innocent Iraqi civilians. Again, women and children, babies hiding under the bed. The Marine finds the baby and shoots him anyway. Indefensible, inexcusable. What are we going to do now? That's the question. When stuff like this pops up, what do we do? What do we say? What will President Biden say? What will Vice President Harris say? Biden's the commander-in-chief. What do you say about this? Even though you weren't commander-in-chief when it happened, you were commander-in-chief when the expose happens. You're commander-in-chief when the news reaches the world. What do you say? How do you defend this? How do you explain this? How do you impose order and morality here? What do you do? And Joe Biden shouldn't be alone in this, because Kamala Harris is saying she's running for president, and she is running for president, and she's the front runner right now. And if the election were today, she probably would be the next president. So if that is in fact the case, I need to know what the new commander-in-chief is going to do. What do you have to say about this? You can't sweep this under the rug. Iraqi babies are worth just as much as American babies. And if we don't operate from that presumption, if we don't operate from that place, then every single intervention you see from the US military will continue to be as lawless, as vile, as immoral and amoral as it has been since the very beginning of this wicked American empire. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we got more with Night School. I got a lot more stories for you, but I need a break just to breathe. This shit is crazy. Stay right here. All right, family, welcome back to Night School. Memphis, Tennessee. It's a city where most folks are Black, and the struggle with gun violence is real. And often because the city is Black and gun violence is real, much of the country doesn't pay attention, or they dismiss it as just something that them Black folk are up to. But it's something that we all need to be paying attention to around the country and maybe even around the world, because the city council wanted to give people a chance to vote on some new gun regulations. They were thinking about making people get permits to carry handguns, also banning AR-15 rifles and letting the cops take guns away from people who might hurt themselves or others. This seems like generally reasonable gun control measures. I have some, as an abolitionist, I'm not sure how much I want the police to be sort of intervening in that last part, but the idea of saying, look, you need a permit to carry a handgun. You can't. Everybody just can't be walking around with weapons under their belly. We don't know who they are or why they have them. Saying you don't need an AR-15 seems reasonable, and saying that people who might hurt themselves because of mental health issues or other documented reasons, maybe they shouldn't be walking around with guns. Make the streets safer, can make our community safer, especially in communities where gun violence hits the hardest. And again, that is us, Black folk. But here comes the drama, because it's always drama. Tennessee's Republican leaders, who aren't Black, they're mostly white, in control of the state, they say no to these reasonable gun measures. They literally told Memphis straight up, if y'all go ahead with this vote, we're cutting millions of dollars from the city. And of course, the city needs those millions of dollars to function. That's a real threat. especially when you think about how much money it takes to keep a city running. Memphis's mayor, Paul Young, who's trying to keep the peace, said, and I quote, "Guns pose a different risk for residents of Memphis than they do for some other municipalities. But we understand that we need to work with our state to determine a set of tools to restore peace in our community." He's basically saying Memphis is different and we got to figure out our own ways to be safe. But he also understands what happens next is not up to him, it's up to the voters, it's up to the lawmakers as well. Crime is up in Memphis, 398 homicides. 398 homicides last year. That's more bodies than days. And burglary shot up to over 14,000. But there's also a twist. It's starting to come down. 2024, crime is down. Violent crime is down by 5%. Fewer rapes, fewer murders, fewer robberies, fewer assaults. The city's making progress. But the state doesn't seem to trust Black leaders, shocker, in Memphis to handle their own business. The tension got even worse this year after the lawmakers they rolled back they rolled back police reforms. Excuse me. They rolled back police reforms that were put in place after Tyree Nichols, a Black man, was killed by the law last year. Killed by police. I'm saying I didn't want to say pigs. Memphis had tried to stop the police from making traffic stops for things like a broken taillight, but the state shut that down too. By the way, to be clear, the reason you do that is because when police stop people for these minor transgressions like a taillight, they lead to these big problems. One, they become what we call pretext stops, where you can find anybody who drives too fast, who drives too slow, who's not four car lengths away, who has a broken taillight. You can find the smallest thing and then use that as an excuse to harass people. Because if everybody has some kind of legal mistake that they make, well, it's impossible to drive and not sometimes drive a little too close to the next car, forget your turns. So anybody, if you follow anybody from a few miles, you're gonna find something you can pull them over for. The problem is they don't pull everybody over; they pull Black folk over. So they were saying, let's roll that back. And Memphis state said, Tennessee, the state legislature said no. So Memphis keeps trying to impose measures to keep people safe and to keep people not harassed by police, and the Republicans keep saying no. But now it's happening differently, because now the state's leaders are trying to control everything, not just with words, but with the pocketbook. The people in Nashville, that's the state capital, the Nashville politicians, the legislature are saying, you can run your state how you want, but then we're taking all the money. If you make sensible gun legislation, we're taking the money. If you try to stop police from being able to harass you, we're taking the money. So when we look at Memphis, Tennessee, we're seeing a microcosm of other things. You often will hear the Republicans say, those Democratic mayors in those Democratic cities, look at the city, they're screwed up. Or they'll say, look at those Black mayors in places like Chicago or Baltimore or Philadelphia. That's the reason why the cities look like that. And that's not true. Republican cities, Democratic cities, doesn't matter. Black folk, we're going to be screwed up as long as we're tied to this system that underdevelops our communities, that exploits our labor, that doesn't give us living wages, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what you often see is exactly what's happening in Memphis right now, where it looks like Black people are screwing over the city. It looks like Black people are the problem. Black mayor, Black people, look at all the death. But when Black people try to impose any kind of self-determination, when we impose any kind of political will to say we're going to control our own destiny in ways that lead to better outcomes, what do? They say, well, we're taking all your money away. So then one of two things happen. We need the money for roads, for schools, for healthcare, for all these things. So we listen to the state capitol and we keep dying. Or we say, we'll do it on our own. And then they starve us. They take all the money out of the city coffers. And then it looks like we can't run a city because we can't balance the budget, when in fact, y'all took the budget. So this is the problem. It's a problem of Memphis, but it's really a problem around and really globally, because we see the same thing in African nations that get exploited and undermined by the World Bank, and exploited and undermined by the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. They get exploited by the United Nations. They get exploited by all these international bodies that never really allow Black people or brown people to control their own destinies. They just make it look that way so that we constantly look like we're not handling our business. All right. I'm going to take another quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Ann Coulter. She said something very fascinating about foundational Black Americans. So I know some of y'all heard that term before. I see some of y'all talking about it in the comments tonight. We'll talk about it right after the break. Is she right about FBA? Is she right about Kamala Harris? We'll tell you on the other side. Stay here. All right, family, welcome back to Night School. Shout out to the new members on the block. We got Kevin Joseph. Welcome, my brother. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining the channel. Thank you for becoming a member. Reginald Miller gifted 5 memberships. Shout out to Reginald for gifting 5 memberships. I hope y'all snatch them things up because we appreciated the gift and we appreciate the new members to the community because you all make us who and what we are. Shout out to you. And like Kimi Abuyale Costa said, get them likes up. Hit them like buttons, man. We love to see what y'all are up to, man. Kimi also said, can we ask Nora about NYU Zionism protected class tomorrow? Fam, remember to set alerts. It will be one to remember. Facts on facts on facts, y'all. In case you didn't know, Professor Nora Adikat will be on Night School tomorrow. We're going to start at 9:30 instead of 9. But Nora will be on, and we will be talking about so many issues related to what's going on campuses and universities in the United States, and also what's going on in Gaza right now, and also what's going on around the world in terms of global solidarity and global struggles. We will cover it all. Karen D has renewed her membership. It says she became a YouTube member, but she's been fan forever. We appreciate you, my sister, and we look forward to you being with us for another million years. All right, y'all, we got another story here. Ann Coulter. Ann Coulter. I didn't expect this one. There's a show on C-SPAN called Washington Journal, and Ann Coulter showed. If you don't know Ann Coulter, she's a conservative commentator. She's a prolific author who's been writing literally since the days of the Clintons. Now, almost 30 years of authorship and presence in the public sphere around issues of American politics. Well, while she was on C-SPAN, she said that Vice President Kamala Harris was not a foundational Black. She said this after she was asked to respond to Donald Trump and his claim at the NABJ that Kamala Harris had just turned Black. She made a comment earlier saying, look, I agreed with Donald Trump. He was right to say that. And they said, do you still feel that way? And she didn't just double down. Y'all girl, Ann Coulter tripled down. I want y'all to hear exactly what Ann Coulter said. Check this out.
Well, I write about this a little bit in my book, Mugged, about racial demagoguery, and also in Adios America about immigration. And that is the important point he should have made is that the entire purpose of affirmative action, set-asides, civil rights laws that limit constitutional rights to freedom of contract, freedom of association, all of that was to make up for the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow. So unless these benefits are going to, roughly defined, foundational Black Americans, the descendants of American slaves, you've taken away the whole purpose of this. And that is exactly what's happened once we got this huge load of immigrants. Now, a Thai who arrived on Wednesday will get an advantage applying to college, applying to corporations over a heterosexual white male in particular. That's the biggest hate group, but any white American. And all of the civil rights laws have been, and affirmative action and so on, have been twisted into just anti-white hatred and open, egregious discrimination. So to make the point that Kamala isn't a foundational Black American, I'm always pointing out to Black people, hey, have you noticed Indians are getting all the good diversity jobs? What did we do to Indians? We didn't enslave them. I mean, most of these immigrants coming in, most are from 90% of legal immigrants are from the third world. And mostly we've just run around saving them from earthquakes and tornadoes and coups and starvation. You know, they owe us, we don't owe them. But to switch from the concept of integration and civil rights for Black Americans to this BSE diversity, it's nothing but discrimination against white people. And that point should be made not just.
So this is complicated. You talk about horseshoe theory. When you when you get to the political extreme, sometimes you find yourself coming back together again. I mean, somebody said in the group for the first time in life, Ann Coulter and Dr. Umar agree. Look, just because Ann Coulter said it don't mean it's wrong. Though it's still, I think, not fully there and ultimately still lightly dipped in racism. So let me break down for you first what's happening here. First, the term itself, foundational Black, is not a term that Ann Coulter made up. There is a movement called FBA that you will see on the internet and in real life, Foundational Black Americans. It's a pro-reparations movement led by Tariq Nasheed. Ann Coulter also said descendants of American slavery. So she was referencing FBA, but she also referenced ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery, a movement started by Yvette Carnell, who has been on the show, and also Antonio Moore, who hasn't been on the show, but who's welcome to come on at any time. And in both cases, and those groups are not the same. Those groups do not identify with each other. Those groups do not bang with each other. Those groups are very adamant about saying, don't put us in the same breath, don't put us in the same sentence. I'm not putting them in the same sentence. I'm saying Ann Coulter mentioned both of y'all, so y'all got accepted. Y'all been both brought up. And those groups talk about the importance of reparations, but not for all Black people in the United States, but for those who actually built the American empire through the exploited labor that their ancestors put out through the project of American slavery. In other words, if your ancestors were enslaved Africans in the United States, then you built this American empire, and therefore you deserve reparations here. What Ann Coulter is saying is the same thing that they've been saying, which is, yeah, there are other groups here, and they deserve rights and freedoms, but we have to think about ADOS as a specific thing, or FBA as a specific thing, and not conflate that with Black people writ large. Yes, there was slavery in the Caribbean. Yes, there was slaves. The Atlantic slave trade didn't just stop in the United States, right? The boat stopped a lot of places. So lots of people are descendants of slaves, but maybe not American slavery. And so therefore CARICOM should be addressing Haiti or PR or Jamaica. That would be their argument. That is their argument. Certainly ADOS's argument. That Carnell has said that very argument right here, and I'm inclined to agree with her. So we can talk about collective Blackness, but don't pretend that every Black person is the same. And Coulter has long stated that she thinks that the diversity moves and the DEI moves and the affirmative action moves and even the reparations moves have somehow now encapsulated such a wide net that the people who deserve it aren't getting it, right? Ann Coulter said to me personally, like, yo, like, you, Mark, your grandparents or great-grandparents were enslaved. Why are you getting the same rights and freedoms as somebody who just came here yesterday? Or she gave this example, somebody who's Thai or Indian. I understand her argument. I agree with the argument that, again, we need to think about descendants of American slavery as our own kind of group who have a particular justice claim here in the United States. But I also believe, I'm speaking for no one but me right now, I also believe that we also have to have a Pan-African sensibility. I also believe that we have to recognize the connectedness of us and understand that our struggles aren't purely rooted in our relationship to American slavery, but also a project of white supremacy that is global, and a regime of imperialism and neo-colonialism here in the United States that doesn't distinguish between where you came from. In other words, when the police come down and shoot us, when the teachers suspend our babies, when the mental health institutions deny us or criminalize us or demonize us, they don't know whether I came from Haiti or Jamaica or Jamestown, Virginia. There's a way that white supremacy has to be fought as a transnational project, not as a domestic one. So we have to be able to hold space for both of those things. So when Ann Coulter said, well, Kamala Harris is Black, of course she's Black, but she's not a foundational Black. She's not from the legacy of slavery. Don't let her buy into your tradition. She's not genealogically incorrect. But the two things I would ask is, one, what is her intention for doing it? Is Ann Coulter doing that because she wants to protect the descendants of American slavery, or is she simply trying to break down and divide us? You know, what does it mean for and this person said this, are we allowing our open enemy to divide and define us? Ann Coulter should not be defining and deciding who a foundational Black is or not. And even if she's just echoing the words of others, let the FBA people say that. Let the ADOS people say that. Ann Coulter saying it. It's not wrong because she said it. She could be 100% right on the analysis, on the observation, but the purpose to which she's putting that observation is deeply dangerous. And second, we have to ask ourselves, not just what's the intention of it, but what's the consequence of it? If the consequence of this is not just to point out the kind of genealogical truths of Kamala Harris's background, but instead to ultimately to say she's Black, but she ain't really Black. She's Black, but she ain't Black. What does that do? How does that serve us? And how does that normalize this idea that she has to meet a certain kind of litmus test of Blackness in order to earn our support or our vote, at the same time that a white man is getting endorsed and supported by those same Black people without any criteria? And again, there's plenty of things to criticize Kamala Harris for. Look in Palestine. Look in Gaza in particular. Look at reparations. Look at criminal justice. Plenty of space to criticize Kamala Harris, but her Blackness, come on, y'all. And now you got Ann Coulter piling on? Nah, I ain't with that. Again, not just for the abstract reason, but for a very concrete, practical reason. Before we go, we got one more quick story I want to talk about. It's an important one. It's a serious one. It's again more Fox News disgustingness that I don't want us to miss, because Fox News has been on one for a long time, but lately they've been even more absurd when it comes to Kamala Harris. And it's not surprising when you have an institution that is fundamentally racist and fundamentally sexist, and then you give them an opportunity, and they're fundamentally obsessed with ratings and money, right? So you give them opportunity to get ratings and money by being racist and sexist. I mean, it feels like a win-win for them. And sure enough, you look at a show called The Five. It comes on at 5 o'clock on Fox News. And you look at what they talk about every day. It's racism and sexism. Well, they did it again. They talked about Kamala Harris in the context of Afghanistan. You know, I'll let you hear it for yourself. Listen to this.
Was somehow involved in the decision, and it was her wise guidance that he was relying upon. Listen, she was the last in the room in Afghanistan. She was the border czar, and she was the deciding vote on trillions of inflationary spending. On those three most popular Joe Biden items, she's basically like a conjoined twin. You cannot separate the two. And let's talk about foreign policy. What is her foreign policy? This is where the president has his most impact. You have a lot of room to maneuver there as commander in chief. We don't know who she is. We don't know what she believes. She's going to get paralyzed in the Situation Room while the generals have their way with her. Right now,
Jesse,
I don't like that. Figuratively,
take
again,
it back.
Have their way with her, control her, not in a sexual way. You're now having F-16s getting sent over to Ukraine, and Ukraine's actually now have their way with her, control her, not in a sexual way.
Look at that smug, nasty, white supremacist, misogynist face right there as he's pretending that he didn't mean exactly what he meant. They're going to have their way with her is disgusting. Again, plenty of space to criticize Kamala Harris. Plenty of space to criticize her foreign policy. Although I suspect these Fox News people wish she were more of a warmonger, more of an imperialist, as opposed to the opposite. But when he says that they'll have their way with her, those generals, even the most obnoxiously racist and sexist hosts in the world at Fox News, including the women, stood up and said, enough, too far. I don't like that. Take it back. Now, they said it tongue in cheek so that they could, they could say that on the record they said take it back, but they're snickering too. You hear Greg Gutfeld snickering too. And now you got Jesse Waters snickering. And then when he says, I didn't mean it in a sexual way, look at that face. Does that look like somebody who's contrite? Does that look like somebody who wishes he hadn't said it? This is human garbage. This is human garbage. When you watch someone make light of something inappropriate, here's the thing, even if he didn't mean it that way, once he realized that it was being taken that way, he found pleasure in it. He found joy in being able to say that. This is the world we're in. I mean, you got Judge Pirro, Jeanine Pirro. No fan of hers at all. Even she said, I don't like that. That smirk, man, I can't get over that smirk. We need to call this out every time. We need to hold people accountable every time. Doesn't mean you got to be a Kamala fan. Doesn't mean you got to do backflips over her or anybody else. But this is the type of behavior, the type of language, the type of rhetoric that gets people hurt, that normalizes rape culture, that normalizes the hatred of women, and particularly Black women. And it doesn't have to happen. Except maybe it does in these kind of places. Because they don't want to engage legitimate arguments. They don't want to have a political debate. They want to remind the world that they hate women and that they really hate Black women. And if you think she ain't Black, she damn sure being treated like one. And the problem is, the more outraged we become, the more disgusted we demonstrate that we are from people like Jesse Waters' words. All that does is make the right more outraged, because then they say, look how sensitive these liberals are. Or they're just pro-rape. They're pro-violence against women. They're pro-extra violence against Black women. And in that context, our outrage mobilizes them more. So it's win-win for them. So the only thing we can do is hold them accountable and try to shut them down. It's the only thing that we can do that makes sense. All right, y'all. I want to thank y'all for watching Night School tonight. I know I hate to end on a somber note, but I had to share that story with y'all. I also want to, and I want to end actually with a wonderful set of words by Coulter, who donated as well. Thank you for your generous donation. Land back and reparations need to go hand in hand. I agree. It ain't enough to just give us money. We need the land back, right? What did Malcolm say in Message to the Grassroots about what a revolution is? That's what I'm talking about, y'all. Anyway, thank you for watching Night School. If you enjoyed the show, please let us know. Drop in the comments what you like. Drop in the comments what you didn't like. Speaking of like, hit that like button. Please hit that like button. Let them YouTube algorithms know that mainstream corporate media ain't the only game in town. Also hit the subscribe button. If you're watching this, a lot of y'all watch this every night and y'all don't subscribe. Hit the subscribe button, family. When you hit the subscribe button, you make our social media footprint bigger, which means the content gets out to more people. I want to thank Rolando Didi, who just gifted 5 more memberships to the channel. Thank y'all, man. I love y'all. Rolando, thank you, my brother. Thank you so much for gifting those 5 memberships. Everybody snatch the memberships up. If anybody else wants to do a gift right now, we're approaching the end of the month. It helps us pay our bills. So please consider that. Also, if you're so inclined, hit the join button. Every time you hit that join button and become a monthly member of the channel, a paid member of the channel, you give us the financial stability we need to do the work that we do in the world. We need that support in order to grow. We need that support in order to give you the programming that we give you every single night. I'm talking about the programming that we give you with night school. Every single night we give you night school. And night school, Monday to Friday, that's producers, that's editing, that's footage, that's organizing, that's studio space. We do all of it because we love you, and we do it from the strength of the people. There's no billionaire backing us. There's no corporate entity cutting a check. It's just the power of the people. So hit that join button so you can get night school Monday to Friday, 9 p.m., Sunday, 9 p.m. For office hours. Saturday and Sunday at 9 a.m. we give you coffee and books on one day, and we give you the classroom in the cell, political prisoner Mumia Abu Jamal the next day. We give you all of this because we believe in radical media. We believe in independent media. We believe in grassroots media. We believe in Black media. And so we keep doing this against the odds, even though they try to shut us down. Some of y'all say, well, I can't make a monthly commitment. That's cool. I understand that. I respect that. And so I say, just make a one-time donation right now. Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, Zelle, they're all on the screen there. Any one of those works. You can drop anything you want. You are not insulting us. $1 is a wonderful donation. If everybody donates something, if everybody does something, nobody has to do everything. Well, if you give $1, we're grateful. If you give $1 million, we're grateful. Everything in the middle, we're grateful for. And if somebody here right now wanted to know the number, the honest answer is that if everybody watching right now were to donate $10, seriously, if everybody watching right now gave $10, we meet our monthly goal. Again, you can give more. I understand if you have to give less, but if everybody watching right now gave $10, we'd be able to pay our bills, pay our staff, pay our producers, hire more talent, expand the podcast, be able to pay our rent. We'd be able to do all the things that are necessary to keep this channel going and to grow the channel if everybody watching gave $10. But again, if you can't, it's not just about money. Just make sure that you hit the like button, like the content, share the content, subscribe to the content. But most of all, make sure that you study the content, because that is what night school is all about. See you tomorrow night. Peace.